All right, so we're going to move to selling in a remote world. So won't spend as much time on this topic, but we did want to, talk about how things are very different now. For instance, if you might have been in person having coffees and lunches or going to offices and selling stuff, and maybe that's different now. So wanted to start with how have things changed in this remote first world where even employees are now completely distributed across the country or even other countries. Let's start with Derek.
Oh, well, I just find it a whole heck of a lot less fun, personally. I mean, so my background's primarily enterprise sales, so relatively low volume, but high dollar, high touch, long sales cycle deals, which really benefited from in-person engagement and on-site visits. And so, two things come to mind. There's a really long list here. This could probably be its own session, but two things come to mind. One is, even in the world of high dollar enterprise sales, selling in a remote world just makes the already super strong case for sales ops like 5 times stronger. I mean, like, sales ops was finally getting the attention and recognition it deserved. And then the last 2 years have only strengthened that case. And then the second is, particularly for younger salespeople who don't have the benefit of a Rolodex, as I call it, or I think the cool kids call them, contact lists. For those who are just coming up and their name is not recognized in an email inbox, or they're not a known quantity within their market, and you just got to get really clever and really, really find a way to stand out with messaging and positioning. That is the only way to get any attention right now, given so much of this is remote. So I think it begs for, on the one hand, the ops side, but on the other hand, the creative side needs to get a lot better at the same time.
Anna, Brian, anything to add?
Yeah, I absolute 110% agree. Sales op and content, digital lead. I mean, I think one of the real big winners from a profession standpoint of virtual selling is the digital marketing manager. If you think before the pandemic, some companies had digital marketing managers, but it was a nice to have, right? You've had more product marketing managers, content, brand, PR, where now you can go probably on any job board and you're seeing that for every single company that it's a need, it's a have to have, because the markets are so noisy to try to break through on all those things that worked in the past, that you have to keep feeding content. You have to be creative. Just for an example, last week, I got an email, and what I find is in the virtual world, we can do things that aren't so formal as they were in the past. I mean, if we were on this call 2 years ago and my doorbell rang and the dog started barking, I would apologize, get off the call, probably have the wrong emotional response. Now it's like, oh, it's all right. The person has a dog barking at the door as well. But the point behind that is, even in, I think, our outreach and what we're trying to do to drive leads and break through the noise for our customers, is we can also be a little less formal. So I got an email last week and it had a picture of a seal on it. And it said, please, respond or don't make my seal sad. I responded to that. And the next thing you know, I handed it over to one of our SDRs. I said, give it a shot. And it was like within an hour, he had like 18 responses. I'm like, okay, you can be different. You can A/B test, you can be creative, anything that will get a response compared to the stale kind of tried messages of past. So content, digital marketing, doing things differently is an absolute must. And then sales ops, right? Knowing what these investments on these things that you are doing different in your A/B experience in the market. Do you have a high ROI? What's working? Let's double down, beat that drum harder. And that's where sales ops is so powerful. But I do, like Derek, I miss it. I'm in enterprise. I don't understand that you don't have a meeting with a big complex opportunity 8 to 9 times before you get it across the finish line, because that's also how you kind of go up ladder on their influencer map, and also wider into an opportunity with the enterprise space. So doing it virtually has been a challenge, but there's ways to do it.
Yeah, and I would just say even more more tactically, I totally agree with what Brian and Derek are saying, but sales um, is feeds on the energy, right? And the momentum. And without that feeling ever on the sales floor, especially for our like younger reps who aren't enterprise yet or who are, just more in the mid-market or SMB, like to not have that exposure to the energy and momentum that comes from being with your tribe and hanging up and having a win and being able to celebrate, or having a bad day where you hear 50 no's and having people that kind of just lift your spirits. Like I think that's been challenging in the remote world, is to create that cohesion, which less experienced reps really need. And there's ways we can come together as a team every day, even for 15 minutes. We can have things in Slack that are celebrating. But I do think this kind of cultural aspect of the less experienced reps is a challenge, and we can artificially create it, but there's only so much you can do. And I've seen teams, even everybody gets on Zoom, they all go on mute, they all cold call, and they come off, when they hang out, but they had just had a great call, and they're trying to create that same, like, let's all hunker down for an hour and pound out a bunch of calls and talk. I have another team that does it in Slack. They have a power hour twice a week where everybody's just pounding it out, and they're just talking about, I got 5 no's, I got this, and it's just they're trying to create that energy, and I think they're doing a good job. And I think this is particularly hard for the entry level sales people that are sitting at home and trying to figure it out on their own and don't have that. So it is a challenge, but lots of sales teams are killing it in the remote world. So it's definitely doable.
So how has the role of marketing changed? So are you finding that you're having to rely, now that you can't go into the office and present that presence, that marketing and marketing qualification of sales leads has become more important? Start with Brian.
Yeah, I think there's been pros and cons. The pros is, I think it's really forced better alignment between sales and marketing. So in the past, there's hundreds of articles about the silos of sales and marketing, but because we're in a virtual world, we rely more on each other and these feedback mechanisms, being in our Zoom world. But it's really, we're more aligned on our objectives, and then running campaigns and A/B testing on the market and getting those learnings that maybe didn't have that wasn't working as well in the past. And then the cons is I do see, like, just from a creativity standpoint, you kind of have to be creative in your own little like silo, and then share that creativity and bounce back. So it's taken a little bit longer, I think, sometimes for new ideas to kind of make their way to the front, to go out and test. Compared to in the past, where you have meetings, you walk down the hall, you bounce things, and the next thing you know, you've made a decision within 4 hours to go try something. But I do see that there's been a big improvement in sales and marketing alignment as one team.
Yeah, too. I love that you said that. It's not just what I'm observing. I think it's exciting to see how much more aligned these teams are. I'm seeing it across the board. Totally.
Yeah, and I think some of that goes back to the rise of sales ops, which the processes that sit within that function have brought sales and marketing together in a really great way. And then the science around top of funnel activities and measurement through the funnel, and MQLs to SQLs. I mean, when both the sales and marketing teams are being closely measured by those metrics, it has a way of bringing people together. But I do think this has been one of the positive outcomes of the last couple of years. That has gotten better.
So Derek and Brian too, because you both mentioned sales ops. If I go in and have to help a company, it's usually the first role that I put in, even before I've identified a sales leader. It's that important. And like a lot of people don't understand the importance of this role. And I feel like I'm selling the role a lot to help people understand. So I'm just curious, because I'm betting a lot of people on the call today too are like, sales ops, what's that, right? So if you want to share some of I just would think it would be helpful for everybody to hear your more perspective on that.
Brian, you're the master at this, man. Go for it.
I don't know about that, but thanks, Derek. I think it's because there's always been this legacy perception that if you have a sales hire, what is the revenue number over that hire's head for the company, right? So if we're going to add resources and expense to bring someone in sales, then how much more revenue can you do? And sales ops you can't just, they just can't carry a quota. Say, well, they're an enterprise rep, so it's a 2x or 3x this quota. I mean, really, I kind of look at them as they're like NORAD, right? They're the triage center. They're everything. They're the data. They're directing you and where for the entire team. And when the companies do not invest in this, you're making costly errors with your sales team. You may be chasing the wrong ideal. You may not have the right ICPs. You're chasing the wrong markets. You don't know because you're not measuring, or you think you're measuring, but you're not getting real-time statistics. So you could waste a lot of time and capital going after wrong customer segments. You don't know how long your stage durations are. So where do we actually go fix what part of our sales process needs to be solved? Our sales cycles too long? Well, we think they're taking a long time in enterprise. Well, yeah, it's enterprise, but is it too long? Are we spending, what part are we spending too much time on? And then what is sales ops helps you identify where you can get the highest ROI on your lead gen at the lowest amount of cost as well. So you may be closing and having a great year, but what's the top of the pipe look like? And how are we feeding the pipe? And how many activities do you need to do X, Y, and Z to feed the top of the pipe? So it's really, they're the brains behind everything that I think provides the sales team a better compass to keep moving towards our North Star. And without it, you're going to have a lot of waste of time and cost.
That was a great answer. I think Derek was right. You clearly know this stuff. So one last question on the remote world. I'm going to start with Anna, which is you work with a lot of portfolio companies. Is there a new challenge that you've seen in the last few years that you may not have seen before, that's like been massively amplified, other than obviously, you know, we can't sit in the same room as everyone else?
Yeah, so there's one interesting challenge, and some teams have overcome it really well, and others struggle, and that is reaching people. Where are you calling, right? And how are you? You're not reaching people at their desk when you're calling, and the numbers might not be. Nobody's picking up, and so I've seen some team. It's a real bifurcation. We've got teams who are really struggling with their connect rate. So they're, let's say, trying to reach a prospect. They're doing 12 touch cadence of calls and emails, and they're not getting any answers. And then you have other teams that are having phenomenal results with their calling, and they have playbooks for when you call somebody and it's on their cell phone. And they found a way. They're using data enrichment, and they're using really thoughtful conversation starters for the different ways you might be hitting somebody and reaching them on a call. But it's interesting to see that some people have not found that to be a struggle, and others have really stumbled on it. And I think, to Brian's point earlier, this creativity too, you do have to be more creative. You do have to stand out. You do have to think we can be more human now. So I see, maybe create teams that were doing creative things 5 years ago, and I was like, oh, that's so cheesy. But today those things are working, and they're because they're standing out. So that's one thing I would say is the connect rates when we're calling. And the other thing is the teams that are getting creative and digging deep and trying to be more human when they are connecting.
Yeah, compassion helps, right? Understanding where your person is, and in a world where everyone is kind of a little burnt out all the time, that fresh introduction, or that fresh way of talking, or getting through to the human, and being a human yourself. I think that's changed too, right? We've all realized, hey, these are humans. We, pretending we're not sitting at home on our cell phone doing these sales can get in the way, in a way that the former corporate environment sort of trained us all not to let the dog bark, right? So moving on, let's talk about